The total amount of sodium in 4 hot dogs and 2 cups of cottage cheese is 5460 milligrams. The total amount of sodium in 5 hot dogs and 6 cups of cottage cheese is 10,150 milligrams. How much sodium is in a hot dog? How much sodium is in a cup of cottage cheese? Okay, well, I'm going to let H be the hot dogs, the amount of sodium in a hot dog, and C be the amount of sodium in cottage cheese. Cottage cheese, you know, I like most foods, but and I really enjoy cheese in general. I don't get cottage cheese. That's just weird, I think. But anyway, I know some people really like it. All right, enough with Mr. Heron's taste buds. 4 hot dogs, 2 cups of cottage cheese. So I'm just going to directly translate that sentence. 4 hot dogs, 4 times H, plus 2 cups of cottage cheese is 5460 milligrams of sodium. That makes sense? However much sodium is in a hot dog, if you take 4 times that, 4 hot dogs, plus how much sodium is in a cup of cottage cheese, take 2 of those, that's going to add up to 5460 milligrams of sodium. Next one. So 5 hot dogs plus 6 cups of cottage cheese. That's a lot of, you're eating all that, it's probably not good for you. Adds up to, what's that? 10,150 milligrams of sodium. So now we just take those 2 equations and we solve for H and C. Those 2, each sentence leads to an equation, you see? So now how do we solve 2 equations? You know what to do, right? We have to multiply one or both. In this case, you want to, let me start here. You want to look at the H's, look at the C's. By the way, you could use X and Y if you want to, but it's easier to use letters that are meaningful. That way, when you're done, you have H, you know what it is. It's hot dogs, right? Whereas if you get X alone or Y at the end, you're like, what was X? Was it the cottage cheese or the hot dogs? You know, whereas you use meaningful letters, it'll be easier. Okay, so you look at the H's, you look at the C's, and you say, hey, I got to make them opposites, either the H's or the C's. It doesn't matter which one. I got to make them opposites. I got to multiply one equation or maybe both, to do whatever it takes, to make them opposites. Well, how could I do that? Well, I can make this C, this 2C, into negative 6C. That'd be the opposite of the plus 6C if I multiplied by negative 3. See that? That'll do it. So you go, oh, there's my plan. Multiply one equation, in this case, just one equation. I don't do both. One equation to make the H's or the C's, doesn't matter which one, opposites. So I'm going to
I have a question.
Question.
So if you're multiplying, so is it every time you do an equation, you're always multiplying by 3?
You're multiplying by whatever it takes to make opposites. Let me rewrite these over here, give a little more room, and that's a great question. Let me first write this out, and then I'll talk more about that. And this was what, 5H plus 6C equals 10,150. Yeah, no, what we're doing is we're multiplying by whatever it takes. And I know that's a funny phrase. I just look at the 2 and I look at the 6 and I say, okay, what does it take to make them be the same number? Well, I got to multiply 3 times 2. Then it'll be 6, just like the other one. But it's got to be negative 3 because I've got to actually make it the opposite. So if I multiply by negative 3, that'll make it 6, and they'll be opposites. Now, instead, great question on that. Instead, I could have done the H's. I could have said, well, how do I make them opposite? Well, you can always multiply, you know, what could I do to 4 and 5 to make them become the same number? What could I multiply them? Well, I could multiply the 5 by 4 and the 4 by 5. And then they're both going to become 20. I'd have to make one of them negative. I'd have to make one of them like negative 5 times 4 and positive 4 times 5 to make one of them a negative 20 and the other a positive 20. So my answer is you do whatever it takes. So you just have to play with the numbers, use your calculator as you need to. Just keep fiddling around until you can figure out what could I multiply by to make them become the same number. So like if I look back, it's a great question. Let me compare back. Like on this one, I looked at 3 and 6 and I said, well, how can I make them both 6? Oh, I got to multiply the top one by 2. Actually, negative 2, because that'll make it negative 6y. That'll be the opposite of the positive 6y. And then I come back to this one. I said, okay, what can I do to 2 and 5 to make them become the same number? Oh, I could multiply, well, I did something. I did the x's on this one, but I could have done the y's. I could tell I'm going to multiply this guy by 5. 5 times 2 would be 10. And this guy by 2, and 2 times 5 would be 10. Then they both become the same number. So you're just multiplying one equation or maybe both. How do you know which one? Whatever it takes. Simply put, you've got to do whatever it takes to make them become the same number, but actually the opposite, one positive, one negative. So I'd have to actually multiply 1 by negative 5. That'd make negative 5 times 2 be negative 10, 2 times 5, positive 10y, then they're opposites. Now, I happen to do the x's instead of the y's. You can do x's or y's, it doesn't matter. I did the x's, and instead I made both the x's 12x, one of them a negative 12x, right? I multiplied 3 by 4 and 3 by negative 4, and the bottom one became a negative 12x. Do you see that? So you can do x's or y's, do one equation or both, whatever, but in the end, you've got to make them become the same number, one positive, one negative, in other words, opposites, so that they'll cancel out when you add them. So it's just whatever it takes, whatever it takes. So coming down to this one then, I'm looking at 2 and 6. I go, well, if I multiply by 3, actually negative 3, that'll do it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this first equation and multiply by negative 3. It's going to go there, there, and there. Like that, okay? And what will become of that? So negative 3 times 4 would be negative 12h minus 6c. Everybody see what I'm doing? Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12h. And negative 3 times 2 is negative 6c equals, and then negative 3 times 5460, I have no idea. My calculator here, it is negative 16,380. Now the bottom equation, no change. Why? Because how do you know you're only supposed to multiply one equation on this one instead of both? Well, because he's already got what I need. He's already the opposite. So again, the answer is you do whatever it takes. If you have to also multiply the bottom, then do that. But this guy and this guy are already opposites right now. So they're good. I don't have to multiply the bottom equation. Just simply multiplying the top equation by minus 3 made that guy the opposite of the bottom guy. You see, they are opposites. So you do whatever it takes to make those guys opposites. Okay, so now we add them up. And right here, 5h minus 12h is minus 7h. These guys cancel because we made them opposites, which is 0. And over there, I don't know. I'm going to use my calculator. And I'm getting minus 6,230. So this is gone. So minus 7h is minus 6,230. Divide by minus 7. I'm getting, what am I getting? H equals, comes out positive, right? 2 negatives makes positive 890. H is positive 890. Okay, so now what do we do once we got, so that's how much sodium's in a hot dog? 890. That's the hot dog sodium. Probably true. Lots of sodium in a hot dog. After eating a hot dog, I'm just super thirsty and thinking maybe I shouldn't have eaten that hot dog. Now, how do we find the other letter? Well, we just plug it in, right? Whenever you get one letter, plug in to find the other. So plug in the H. Now that you have one answer, just plug it in. H equals 890. And I'll just say anywhere. Plug it in anywhere you feel like. Anywhere will work. I'll just grab this equation right here. Whatever, it's just convenient and close by. 5 times h plus 6c is 10,150, right? I'm just grabbing that equation, and I'm going to plug in for h right here. 890, because I now know h is 890. And so I can solve for c. So 5 times 890, what's that going to be? Use my calculator. I'm getting 4450 plus 6c is 10,150. All right, and then here's the wall of separation. C is saying I won't be alone, so get rid of this 4450 from both sides. Cancels out. 6c is, I'm getting 5,700. Last step, divide by 6, boom, boom. C equals, it's funny I can see there. C equals 950. There we go. So cottage cheese has 950. Cottage cheese has more than a hot dog. It's crazy. See, we shouldn't eat the stuff. I told you cottage cheese was just weird. So there we go. So let me recap. How did we do all that we just did? Well, I just took the two equations and they became, I'm sorry, the two sentences became two equations, pretty straight ahead. 4 hot dogs, 4H, 2 cottage cheese, 5460, etc. And then with two equations and two letters, you have to multiply one equation or both, whatever it takes, to make opposites. That's the whole deal. So you just spend your time looking at the H's or looking at the C's, and you can do either one, doesn't matter which one, and say, how can I make them be the same number by multiplying? How can I multiply one equation? How can I multiply one of them or both of them in order to make them the same number? And so I saw 2 and 6, and I said, oh, I can multiply by 3. 3 times 2 will be 6. It'll be the same as the bottom, so I better make it -3. So that'll make it -6. It'll be the opposite of the bottom one, the +6. And so that's what I did. But you have to multiply the whole equation, right? I had to multiply that -3 to both sides of the equal sign, all three terms. And see, and then the bottom equation, no change at all. I only needed to multiply the top equation on this one. Sometimes we need to multiply both of them to make them become the same number, one positive, one negative, opposites. Then we add them up, C's eliminate, we can solve for H. Once you get one letter, plug in anywhere to get the other letter. And there we go.